Well, good evening, and welcome to our Wednesday night Bible study. It is June 8th, 2022, and we are excited about all that Jehovah is doing in the lives of his people. So I thank you for joining me on tonight. We have this music going on in the background, and we are getting ready to present our lesson on tonight. Lesson 38 of 52 lessons through the Torah in 1 year. So we don't own the rights to this music. We just utilize it to get our hearts and minds ready so that we can block out these worldly distractions. In a minute, I'm going to cut off my phone. I'm going to cut that phone off. Right now, my music comes through the phone, so I can't shut it off. But we are going to cut that phone off and get ready for a wonderful lesson in our study of the Torah on tonight. So I don't own the rights to the music, but we're listening to it, and it is getting us ready. Make sure that you mute yourself as you come on so that I don't hear that. I already have the music going, but I'm going to shut that off shortly. But I'm still getting ready for a fantastic lesson on tonight. Numbers chapter 16, verse 1 to chapter 18, verse 32. And I am excited. I mean, that book of Numbers is, wow, it is an exciting, I mean, there's always so much to glean from the lesson that you can learn from the study of the instructions of Jehovah to his people and the journey of his people through. Now they're going back in wilderness because they refuse to go in and take the land. And so as we get into our lesson tonight, we always want to remember that backdrop to what's going on. We want to know the context of what is going on. So as we're getting that context together and trying to figure out what's happening, because most of us have not, let me turn that down just a little bit. I feel like I'm shouting. But one of the things we learn as we go through these lessons is that they're applicable to everything we're doing today. But when you study the context of the lesson and you begin to understand the situations and circumstances, which we call the context of what is going on with the people at that time, it helps you better understand what was happening, and then how do you practically apply that to your life. And so I just thank you so much for joining me on tonight. As I said, it's a fascinating lesson. So much has happened. I mean, when you're told to go in and take the land, but you say, no, I don't think we can do that. So Jehovah says, okay, since you can't do it, then turn around. Change of direction. You're going north, go south, and I will tell you what to do. And we know that that could be very disheartening. The people were disheartened. They decided, wait a minute, we made a mistake. Can we correct it? But it was still out of self, not selfless of saying, you know, we made a mistake, we're sorry. What would you have us do? Is there any way we can change the repercussions from our refusal? Well, let me shut this off. I'm going to have to get me a better cover because I kind of messed up my cover. So it's not that easy for me to turn his phone off now. There we go. Because always have some people call me at just the time I'm getting ready to go on, and it happened again tonight. Right around 4:30, I start getting calls about the job. So let's get into our lesson on tonight. Make sure you mute yourselves as you come on, so that my wife was telling me, I think it was last week, that she was hearing a whole lot of conversation going on. And I was telling her, I didn't hear it that often, but I did. And I guess that's because I was fixated on the lesson. But we're in Numbers chapter 16, verse 1 through lesson chapter 18, verse 32. So we're going to get ready to go into our lesson. We're going to pray, and then we'll get started. Jehovah Elohim, we thank and praise you for this day. This is the day that you have made, and we rejoice and we are glad in it. We thank you, Jehovah, for the Ruach HaKodesh, your Holy Spirit, that comes to guide us into all truth. As we study your word to show ourselves approved, workmen not ashamed of our hire, rightly dividing the word of truth, we thank you for the very spirit of truth that you have given to us to guide us on our journey. So we bless you and praise you now in this festive season of Shavuot. It's not one day, it's a 7-day festival in honor of the first fruits that Jehovah, and we think and we look back on all the blessings that you have bestowed upon us in this past year. So we bless you and praise you now for all that you do. In the name of Yeshua, our Messiah, we pray. Amen. All right. Oh, somebody else is coming in. Okay. Remember, when you come in, mute yourselves. Please mute yourselves. Okay, so now I'm going to get into my shared screen. And we're going to try to get you up and out of the way. Yep, mute yourselves. And I'll get my slideshow press. So I'm going to go through the word. We go line upon line, precept upon precept. So we go through the word, but it never hurts to study a little bit beforehand and then really meditate on it afterwards and study afterwards, so that you can glean even more from our lessons. And so with that, I'm going to get into my slideshow and begin. All right, this is lesson 38, and the title of the lesson is Korach, which is amazing that would be the title of the lesson, because it's usually not something that we would consider negative, but we do consider that what Korach was doing was negative. But at the very same time, it is the height of the understanding of this lesson, lesson 38. And so with that, we're going to get into our lesson. Do just a little bit of a backdrop, because I think it'll help us as we go through this study. As we go through our introduction, Korach is Moses' first cousin, and he stages a rebellion against Moses and Aaron. Together with some ringleaders, he gathers over 250 men of renown, means that these are leaders in this various community. Remember that the tabernacle was set up in the middle, in all of the 12 tribes, 3 on each side, east, north, south, and west, with 3 tribes on each side. And immediately surrounding the tabernacle, the courtyard of the tabernacle, were the Levites. Now, in the tribe of Levi, which is where Moses and Aaron, of course, they're brothers, they were from the tribe of Levi. Well, in this particular tribe, these were the tribe of those that were responsible for, excuse me, the teaching of the people, the tabernacle, and all of those things. So this is the class that was supposed to keep the other people in order as they go on their journey. So basically, Korah says that the entire congregation is holy and that Jehovah is in the midst, which was the truth. The people were considered, because they had made their offerings and everything, they're holy in the sense of being set apart. So all of the Levites were set apart, and all of the people now were in a state. Of course, they sinned, and there was death in the camp, because immediately all those who came back with a negative report were stricken with the plague and died. So basically, Korah says that Jehovah is in the midst. We see that. We agree with that. So then he says, so why do you raise yourself above the Jehovah's assembly? So basically, he says, since we're all, how do you get this special classification? You, Moses, as leader, but specifically, he's talking about Aaron as the high priest, because all Levites were in the priestly class, but only in the families of Aaron could the priest that served in the tabernacle, or the high priest, his descendants, were the only ones that could serve in the sense of raising the sacrifices before Jehovah. And so Korach is raising this specific issue, and his issue is with the appointment of Aaron as high priest. Why? Because that's Moses' brother. So now he's saying there's nepotism here. If we had a vote, let's vote on who is going to be the one who is the high priest, and thinking that he's much more knowledgeable than Aaron, which is what happens most of the time. Everybody thinks they're more knowledgeable than the person that's teaching. But that's just a flaw in those that are listening. Then we go on and says, remember that Jehovah told Moses, now we get into some of the lessons, to turn the people around and go back into the desert because they had refused to go in and take the land. From that negative situation, other situations began to arise as the people became angry at Moses and Aaron when the problem was their refusal to go in and take the land. They felt like, we apologize, now let us go in and take it. But no, Jehovah had already made the decision that you are going to turn, and for every day they spent in the land checking it out, which was a total of 40 days, of each one of those days, there were going to be that number of years before they would go into the land. So he basically said, all of you adults, you 603,000 fighting men, you're all going to die in the wilderness. But your children will go in. Well, they came up with their own rationale now. Right? This ain't right. So we want to do things, once again, we want to do things our way. And rather than seeking for advice, you're basically making a statement that you're now advising God, Jehovah. You're advising the Creator. So also we want to understand that the Kahat clans were the camp next to the tabernacle. In other words, on the southern tabernacle. Remember, the east side is where the entrance to the courtyard was. So on the east side, if this were the courtyard, on the east side is where Moses, Aharon, and that group of Levites stayed on this end. Then there would be Levites on the north side, the south side, and the west side. And they would have maintained close proximity to the tabernacle because they were eating holy sacrifices and things of that type. So their responsibility was to make sure the people, even in that they're taking down and they're putting back together the tabernacle in the courtyard and moving through the wilderness, to make sure that they didn't get too common with what was happening. So we'll also notice that some of the people that are messing up is with the tribe of Reuben. Well, Reuben was one of the three tribes that were situated on the south side of the tabernacle. So that's why Reuben in that group was kind of engaged in this crisis conflict that Jehovah's getting ready to deal with. So when Aaron and his sons had finished covering the holy furnishings and all the holy utensils, when the camp is about to move forward, then the descendants of Korach are to come and carry them. So they would carry the Ark of the Covenant would be covered. The menorah would be covered. The table of showbread would be covered. The table of incense, all of these things would be covered. And they would be covered under the specific instructions of Jehovah that Aaron and his sons were to cover them. Once they were covered, then the Korach tribe could come in, put the poles on their shoulder and carry these things. Well, they were told not to touch the holy things. They were not to come inside of the tabernacle to begin to dismantle it until everything was covered and out. Then they could come in. So they got high on themselves and began to say, why can't we do what Aaron and his sons do? And what did Jehovah say? You are not to touch the holy things so that they won't die, and that Aaron, you and your sons as responsible people will not. We can't determine for Jehovah. He determines for us. We can't determine what's holy. He determines what's holy. And if these are his instructions, then that is what we should follow. So with that, we'll get into our lesson. So that gives you kind of a back. So it wasn't an easy time because they were told to go back, turn around, go in the other direction. Take the tabernacle down so you're getting ready to move again, and here these things are coming up. They don't want to do what Jehovah said to do, and they're blaming Aaron and Moses for the fact of what's going on. In this instance, they're rebelling against Aharon or Aaron and his position, and then the family of the tribes of Reuben and the other tribes that were around in that area were rebelling against Moses and saying he shouldn't be their leader. They're going to find, remember, they were going to find somebody to take them back to Egypt, where they came from. Well, this was their thought process, so it helps you understand what's going on, so we don't get to the place to where we say, that'll never happen. No, that happens with us each and every day if we make decisions that are contrary to what the commands we have been given, the rules that we've been given to go by as followers of Yeshua and members of the community of believers. So let us begin. Now, chapter 16, verse 1. Now Korach, the son of Itzhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi. Remember, he had these sons. And each one of those sons would put their group that they were grouped under would be on one side of the tabernacle. So the Kohath clan were under the south side of the tabernacle. The son of Levi. They were all sons of Levi, along with Datan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Pelet, the descendants of Reuben. So that lets you know that those tribes over in that area were saying, yeah, that sounds like a good idea that Korah and others are bringing up to them. Again, it says, siding with them were 250 men of Israel, leaders of the community, key members of the council, men of reputation. They assembled themselves against Moshe and Aharon and said to them, you take too much on yourselves. After all, the entire community is holy, every one of them, and Jehovah is right here in the midst, is among them. So why do you lift yourselves up above Jehovah's assembly? Are you so great? Do you have special favor? Well, the last time that happened with Aaron and his sister Miriam, we know it didn't go well for them. So verse 4, when Moshe heard this, he fell on his face. Moses know that they have rebelled against Jehovah, not just Aaron and him, but they are going, Jehovah said, go south. They're rebelling against that. We're going to go the way we want to go. Then he said to Korah and his whole group, in the morning, Jehovah will show you who are his and who is the holy person he will allow to approach him. Yes, he will bring whomever he chooses near to himself. This is good advice. Moses is giving them an opportunity to repent. They're not going to take it, but he's giving them that opportunity. Do this, Moses says, take census, Korah and all your group. That's that 250 that he brought up of the tribe of Levi, of Kahat, of the Levites. Put fire in your pans and put incense in them before Jehovah tomorrow. The one whom Jehovah chooses will be the one who is holy. It is you, you sons of Levi, who are taking too much on yourselves. Then Moshe said to Korah, listen here, you sons of Levi. Is it for you a mere trifle that the Elohim of Israel has separated you from the community of Israel to bring you close to himself, so that you can do the work in the tabernacle of Jehovah and stand before the community serving them? The rest of the community can't do it. Only the Levites can carry the equipment. Only the Levites and of the special grouping of Aaron can serve the animal sacrifices and the things of the temple, and have been chosen by Jehovah to do that. Well, now Korach and this group is challenging everything because they've been told to go away. You're going to die. Now you can take that as a, okay, everybody's going to die. So now let me find out, am I going to can I get back right with Jehovah? No, they're coming against Jehovah. And the more you turn your back on the word, the more negativity will flow from you. So he's letting them know. Then in verse 10, he says, he has brought you close and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you. Now you want the office of Kohen too. That means he wants to be the office of high priest. He wants that to come from his family, right? So Moses is pointing, this is what you're really saying. He says, that's why you and your group have gathered together against Jehovah. You're not against Aaron and I, you're rebelling against Jehovah. That never goes well. Moses is giving them every opportunity to repent. After all, what is Aaron, that you complain against him? So Moses is pointing out to them their sin. You're not just mad at Aaron. He was the choice of Jehovah, not Moses. Moses said, that's not my choice. Jehovah gave him that title. You saw me anoint him. You saw all of those things. Verse 12, then Moshe sent to summon Datan and Aviram, the sons of Eliab, but they replied, we won't come up. So he's trying to say, well, where are the rest of them? Right? Is it such a mere trifle, the Datan and Aviram are saying, bringing us up from a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the desert? He's saying, we're going to die anyway. So we need new leadership. It wasn't because of leadership that you didn't go in. It was because the leaders that you chose to go forward, you chose to listen to them. And they said, we can't do it. That's why this is all happening. But now reasoning is going out the window. So they saying now we were going into a land flowing with milk and honey, and you didn't deliver that to us. It wasn't because Moses wanted them to go in. It's because you followed the negative report of the 10 spies that came back and said, we can't do it. That now you arrogate to yourself the role of dictator over us. They say, who are you now? We're going to choose a new leader. You haven't at all brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey. And you haven't put us in possession of fields and vineyards. Do you think you can gouge out these men's eyes and blind them? We won't come up. So now they're setting up their whole system to handle even the priesthood. They're setting that up, and that's why they don't want to come up. We already got something going down here now. Right in the midst of the area around the tabernacle, they're trying to set up another one. Moshe, that's why Moses got so angry, because he knew what was happening. Moshe was very angry and said to Jehovah, don't accept their grain. That's why he said, don't accept their grain offering. I haven't taken one donkey from them. I've done nothing wrong to any of them. Moshe said to Korach, you and your group, be there before Jehovah tomorrow. You, they, and Aaron. So Aaron is going to come along with this group of 250. Each of you take his fire pan and put incense in it. Every one of you. Bring before Jehovah his fire pan. 250 fire pans. It's a little pan that you would have on a little chain, and you would put coals, hot coals in there from this altar that they making, right? And put your incense on there, and then bring that before the tabernacle. Now, if they were in their right mind, when he said 255 pans, you two and Aaron, each one his fire pan, they would have remembered what happened to Aaron's two sons when they brought strange incense and did something that Jehovah told him not to do. Fire came out and consumed them. But right now, you're in self. And so since you're in self, you can't reason these things. Jehovah's given them every opportunity to change. But now Moses is going to have to go from someone that's angry to intercede for them. He goes on, each man took his fire pan, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and stood at the entrance to the tent of meeting with Moshe and Aharon. Korach assembled all the group who were against them. Now that's the group that's against Moshe and Aharon at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Then the glory of Jehovah appeared to the whole assembly. So now, that little thing they set up where they were, the presence of Jehovah comes over the tabernacle that he told them to build. Not that thing they were trying to build in their little camp by themselves. Jehovah said to Moshe and Aharon, separate yourselves from this assembly. I'm going to destroy them right now. So this whole group is getting ready to get killed. And anyone that's siding with them. Jehovah says, that's it. Moses and Aaron, they fell on their faces and said, oh God, God of the spirits of all humankind, if one person sins, are you going to be angry with the entire assembly? So now they did the same thing that who did? Abraham. Abraham did the same. He said, don't kill them all for the sins of, if I can get 50, you know, he went all the way down to 10, and he didn't stop what was going to happen because there wasn't even 10. So that's letting you know their minds weren't right. So then he said, Jehovah answered Moshe, tell the assembly to move away from the homes. Now I put an asterisk there because the same word for home could be temple, because the temple was considered the house of Jehovah. And so the same word can mean house. It could mean temple. That's why many scholars say that when on the day of Shavuot, when the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, came to descend on the assembled, that where they were assembled, when it says they were in the home, well, there were 300 people, 3,000 people were baptized that day. How is that possible in somebody's? You can't do that in someone's home because it has to be water from a stream. And so what had happened is at the tabernacle, there was a stream that flowed through the corner of the tabernacle and of the temple, rather, the temple courtyard. And there was a pool for immersion or mikvah because people didn't want to come into the temple unclean. They wanted to make sure. So the same word could be read in Hebrew, homes. Remember it said they were in the upper room, where they could have been on the what? Second story of the temple. That's why they were able to baptize 3,000 in that one day, because they were holding service at the temple. Told them to get away from that thing they done made up there, Korach, Datan, and Abiram. Get away from that. Moses got up and went to Datan and Abiram, and the leaders of Israel followed him. There he said to the assembly, leave the tent of these wicked men. Don't touch anything that belongs to them, or you may be swept away in all their sins. So they moved away from all around the area where Korach, Datan, and Abiram lived. Then Datan and Abiram came out and stood at the entrance to their tents with their wives, sons, and little ones. Moshe said, here is how you will know that Jehovah has sent me to do all these things that I haven't done, and that I haven't done them out of my own ambition. If these men died a natural death like other people, only sharing the fate common to all humanity, because we're all going to die. That's what he's pointing out. You were all going to die anyway. You need to get right with Jehovah, because judgment's already been rendered about your status, but not your destination. So the people moved away from all around the area where Korach, Datan, and Abiram lived. When they came outside, Moses told them what was going to happen. But verse 30, but if Jehovah does something new, if the ground opens up and swallows them with everything they own, and they go down alive to Sheol, which is a place for the souls to rest while judgment is waiting, then you will understand that these men have contempt for Jehovah. We call it hell. Now, when he said, speaking to the congregation, saying, get you up from about the tabernacle, is what the King James says. In that scripture, in the King James translation, it says, speak unto the congregation, saying, get ye up from about the tabernacle of Korah, Datan, and Ahiram. That lets us know. King James tried to do a word for word, remember, but their understanding of everyone after that wasn't tabernacle. They translated that word as home. But King James, in his translation with his scholars, called it tabernacle. That lets us know exactly what Moses was talking about. He wasn't just talking about the tent. He was talking about this tabernacle that they had set up. He said, you better get away from that. Don't touch any of them things. Whatever they have, whatever they're praying to, whatever that is going on, you better get away from it, because all of it is getting ready to have a problem. The moment Moshe finished speaking, the ground under them split apart. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households. All the people who had sided with Korach and everything they owned. So they and everything they owned went down alive into Sheol. The earth closed over them, and their existence in the community ceased. All Israel around them fled, and their shriek shouted, "The earth might swallow us too." Then fire came out from Jehovah and destroyed the 250 men who had offered the incense. They didn't get it. Therefore, the wages of sin is death. Therefore, death came. The tabernacle that they had built was swallowed up. Their homes were swallowed up. Everything they owned. And everybody who what? Sided with them. Now, it says chapter 17 in most Bibles, but in the Hebrew scriptures, it would be a continuation of chapter 16. Jehovah said to Moshe, "Tell Eleazar, the son of Aaron," that was his oldest son at this point, "the Kohen, to remove the fire pans from the fire and scatter the smoldering coals at a distance, because they have become holy." These people gave up their lives for foolishness, but that death was centered around what? The courtyard of the tabernacle. Also the fire pans of these men whose sin cost them their life, the wages of sin is death, have become holy because they were offered before Jehovah. Therefore, have them hammered into plates to cover the altar. This will be a sign for the people of Israel. So you're going to take all that and hammer that together and put that together and make it as a covering for the brass altar. To remind the people of Israel that an ordinary person, not descended from Aaron, is not to approach and burn incense before Jehovah, if he wants to avoid the fate of Korach and his group, as Jehovah had said to him through Moshe. So Aaron is now getting what? Instructions of what is supposed to take place with that, with the fire pan. But the very next day, look at that, the very next day, the whole community of the people of Israel complained against Moshe and Aaron. "You have killed Jehovah's people." Once it began to turn your back on scripture and act out of flesh, then more and more negativity is going to come, just like it did with those who persecuted Yeshua, until it came to the point to where they wished Yeshua dead. Let's go on. However, as the community was assembling against Moshe and Aaron, they looked in the direction of the tent of meeting and saw the cloud cover it, and the glory of Jehovah appeared. Moshe and Aaron came to the front of the tent of meeting. Jehovah said to Moshe, "Get away from this assembly, and I will destroy them at once." Again, Aaron and Moshe fell on their faces and began to pray. While they were praying, Moshe said to Aaron, "Take your fire pan, put fire from the altar, the correct altar, in it, lay incense on it, and hurry with it to the assembly to make atonement for them, because anger has gone out from Jehovah and the plague has already begun." So people falling dead now. They praying, Moses is praying, Aaron is in action, and people are dying all around them. Aaron took it as Moshe had said and ran into the middle of the assembly. There the plague had already begun among the people, but he added the incense and made atonement for the people. He stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stopped. Those dying from the plague numbered 14,700, besides those who died in the Korach incident. Aaron returned to Moshe at the entrance to the tent of meeting, and the plague was stopped. Jehovah said to Moshe, "Speak to the people of Israel and take from them staffs, one for each ancestral tribe, from each leader of a tribe, 12 staffs. Write each man's name on his staff and write Aaron's name on the staff of Levi. For each tribe leader is to have one staff. Put them in the tent of meeting in front of the testimony where I meet with you. Then he says, the staff of the man I'm going to choose will sprout buds. In this way, I will put a stop to the complaints the people of Israel keep making against you. These are sticks. Jehovah says that the stick, this is the staff, that's a piece of wood that has been ground down to a staff, the shape of a staff, and from a piece of wood, a tree. He's saying that the one that buds, in other words, it's going to come alive and bud. Yeshua said, the word that I speak are spirit and they are life. These things are going to, this staff is going to come alive. This is some great stuff. Moshe spoke to the people of Israel, and all their leaders gave him staffs, one for each leader, according to their ancestral tribes, 12 staff. Aaron's staff was among their staff. Moses put the staff before Jehovah in the tent of testimony, or the tent of meeting. The next day, Moshe went into the tent of the testimony, and there he saw that Aaron's staff for the house of Levi had budded. It had sprouted not only buds, but flowers and ripe almonds as well. Moshe brought out all the staff from before Jehovah to all the people of Israel, and they looked, and each man took back his staff. Jehovah said to Moshe, return Aaron's staff to its place in front of the testimony. It is to be kept there as a sign to the rebels, so that they will stop grumbling against me and thus not die. This is grace. Jehovah's telling them the way you're going about this is wrong, and your rebellion is going to cause you all to die. Moshe did this. He did as Jehovah had ordered him. But the people of Israel said to Moshe, oh no, we're dead men, lost. We're all lost. Whenever anyone approaches the tabernacle of Jehovah, he dies. We will all perish. So now they're still, rather than repentant, basically saying, if we go near the tabernacle, we're going to die. So they don't even want to come and be blessed. They don't want to bring the sacrifice. They say, if we come near that, we're going to die because we messed up. We messed up again and again. And even though Jehovah is telling them to stop rebelling so you won't die, they're saying that our rebellion is because we're dying. Chapter 18, Jehovah said to Aaron, you, your sons, and your father's family line will be responsible for anything that goes wrong in the sanctuary. Now, this is with what? With whom much is given, much is required. Responsibility for Aaron. You and your sons with you will be responsible for anything wrong in your service as Kohanim or as priests. But you are to bring your kinsmen, the tribe of Levi along with you, with yourself, to work together with you and help you. So don't think you're any better than them. You're just in a different position than them. Don't flaunt this over them, or you're not going to be holy. You're going to die. But you ought to bring they're going to help you, you and your sons with you, when you are there before the tent of meeting. They are to be at your disposal and perform all kinds of tasks related to the tent. Only they are not to come near the holy furnishings or the altar, so that neither they nor you will die. So you're going to cover these things just like I told you. You're going to cover it up, and you're responsible for keeping them out until such time as everything is covered and you allow them to come in. They will work together with you in your duties related to the tent of meeting, whatever the service in the tent may be. But an unauthorized person is not to come near you. Don't come. Don't bring them in there while you're covering everything up. They don't come in till afterward. You will take charge of all the holy things and the altar, so that there will no longer be anger against the people of Israel. I myself have taken your kinsmen, the Levim or the Levites, from among the people of Israel. They have been given as a gift to Jehovah for you, so that you can perform the service in the tent of meeting. You and your sons with you will exercise your prerogatives and duties as Kohanim, as priests, in regard to everything having to do with the altar and within the curtain. I entrust the service required of Kohanim to you. The unauthorized person who tries to perform it is to be put to death. Verse 8, Jehovah said to Aaron, I myself have put you in charge of the contributions given to me. Everything consecrated by the people of Israel, I have given and set aside for you and your son. This is a perpetual or forever law. Here is what is to be yours of the especially holy things taken from the fire. Every offering they make, that is, every grain offering, sin offering, guilt offering of theirs that they turn over to me, will be especially holy for you and your sons. You are to eat it in an especially holy place. Every male may eat it. It will be set apart for you. So the offerings that they bring, the animal sacrifices that are not a complete burnt offering, that part of the animal that is waved before the altar of Jehovah, that goes to them to eat, but it has to be eaten within the courtyard. Can't take that home. But Jehovah's saying, I'm taking care of you. I will handle all of your needs. Also, he said, verse 11, yours is the contribution of the people of Israel given in the form of wave offerings. I have given these to you, your sons, your daughters with you. This is a perpetual law, forever. Everyone in your family who is clean may eat it. So there are other parts that everyone can eat. He says, all the best of the olive oil, and when they bring in their best, that 10%, when they're bringing their best, the best of that goes to Aaron and his family. The portion after that 10th given to Jehovah. Well, what happens to the rest of it that doesn't get burned on the altar? That goes to Aaron. Now, that part of it, that was part of the offering brought to the altar, that wasn't used on the altar or wasn't required, that goes to Aaron and his son, but only for the males of the family, and has to be eaten in the courtyard. When they're bringing their tithes, that other part of their tent that they bring, that they can, his whole family can live off of. All the best of the olive oil, wine and grain, and the first portion of what they give to Jehovah, I have given to you. So I have entrusted that to you. The first produce to turn ripe of all that is in their land. Shavuot is when the bread is brought before. It's beginning of the season of the first fruits of the harvest coming forth. They're going to bring that. Part of it is going to be on the altar. The other part is for Aaron and his family. It's to be yours. Every clean person in your family may eat it. Everything in Israel, which has been consecrated unconditionally, is to be yours. Everything that comes first out of the womb of all living things which they offer to Jehovah, whether human or animal, will be yours. However, the firstborn of a human being, you must redeem. And the firstborn of an unclean beast, you are to redeem. So in other words, when you're bringing this particular animal or human, then that are redeemed in the shekel, the 5 shekels is paid for that person. Those shekels go to Aaron and his family, his sons and their family. That's where that goes. So he's taking care of all of the financial and physical needs of Aaron and his sons. As you value it using the temple sanctuary, which we talked about the 5 shekels. But the firstborn of an ox, sheep, or goat, you are not to redeem, they are holy. You are to splash their blood against the altar and make their fat go up in smoke as an offering made by fire, as a fragrant aroma for Jehovah. Their meat will be yours, like the breast that is waved and the right thigh, they will be yours. All the contributions of holy things which the people of Israel offer to Jehovah, I have given to you, your sons and your daughters with you. This is a perpetual law, an eternal covenant of salt or preservation. Before I'm taking care of you, before Jehovah, for you and your descendants with you. You don't have to worry about any of these things. This is how you ought to be sustained. Jehovah said to Aaron, you are not to have any inheritance or portion in their land. I am your inherent portion and inheritance among the people of Israel. To the descendants of Levi, I have given the entire tenth of the produce collected in Israel. It is their inheritance in payment for the service they render in the tent of meeting. From now on, the people of Israel are not to approach the tent of meeting, so that they will not bear the consequences of their sin and die. So you only come to that place where you're bringing your animal. That's it. That's the only place you come. So the part of the tent that's given in terms of tithe, that also goes to the Levites as well. Aaron's going to have more than enough. And the rest of it goes to the Levites, according to their numbers and everything else that will be laid out. Only the Levite are to perform the service in the tent of meeting, and they will be responsible for whatever they do wrong. This is to be a permanent regulation through all your generations. They are to have no inheritance among the people of it. In other words, they're not going to be given a portion of land that's just for them, even though they're going to have cities that they are responsible for. But it's in essence, Jehovah saying, I will provide for you as well. In these cities, you can have animals that you're raising, all of those things to help with your families, but the tenth will even come from you. Look what he said. Because I have given to the Levites as their inheritance the tenth of the produce which the people of Israel set aside as a gift for Jehovah. This is why I've said to them that they are to have no inheritance among the people of Israel. Jehovah said to Moshe, tell the Levites, when you take from the people of Israel the tenth of the produce which I have given you from them as your inheritance, you are to set aside from it a gift for Jehovah, 1/10 of the tenth. So now whatever Aaron and his sons give to the Levites, they're going to take a tenth of that and give it back to Aaron and his son. That separates them from the rest of the part of the tribe of the Levites. From everything given to you, you are to set aside all that is due Jehovah, the best part of it, its holy portion. Therefore, you are to tell them, when you set aside from it its best part, it will be accounted to the Levites as if it were grain from the threshing floor and grape juice from the wine. It's going to be yours. You may eat it anywhere, you and your household, because it is your payment in return for your service in the tent of meeting. Moreover, because you will have set aside from it its best parts, you will not be committing any sin because of it. In other words, taking something that's holy and taking it outside the courtyard. For you are not to profane the holy things of the people of Israel, or you will die. So, in other words, that tenth you're supposed to give back is covering you. Now, if you decide not to give the tenth, then you on your own. Oh, this concludes our lesson for today. This is some fascinating study that we're just being involved with. It points out the importance of doing things in the manner in which Jehovah, our Elohim, our God, has instructed us to do. And the Torah, the first five books of the Bible, are called Jehovah's instructions to his people. And we, as believers in Yeshua, have been grafted into all of the rules, regulations, and covenants of the children of Israel. So we're not considered Jews, but we've been grafted into the covenant, so everything that's available to them becomes available to us. So just as we spoke of in terms of when there's a foreigner or someone who's not a Jew that wants to adhere to the rules, then you ought to treat them just as if they are Jewish. Well, that's what's being done right now. As we learn the Torah, the more we learn, the more we'll understand what we are to do. There is no temple, so we can't. There is no temple, so we can't take sacrifices to the temple. But our sacrifices are praise and worship and obedience to what we are required to do. Those things that we can do, then those we do. That's why we celebrate Shavuot for 7 days, so that it reminds us of our covenant with Jehovah, our Elohim. So with that, I want to conclude our lesson. We made it. We're under an hour, so we bless Jehovah for that. And so we're going to pray, and then I'll see you on Shabbat night, Friday night. We will still be in Shavuot. It started Sunday and it will end on Saturday night, Sunday. 7 days. All right, with that, let us get out of this, stop my shared screen, and let us pray. Jehovah Elohim, I thank you and praise you for this day. Thank you for your word. Your word is a lamp unto our feet, that it lights our path. We thank you for the Ruach HaKodesh, your Holy Spirit, that comes to guide us into all truth. We worship you and we praise you and we thank you, Ruach HaKodesh, for opening our hearts and our minds to receive all that you're instructing through us through your Torah, and for empowering us to be obedient. Even as we choose, our hearts are with you in the teaching of your word to us as we go through line upon line and precept upon precept. In the name of Yeshua, our Messiah, I pray. Amen. Shalom, everyone. I'll see you on Shabbat for our Haftarah, or our companion study for this lesson. Shalom.